This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about John Durham. And in case you're not aware, which is very possible given the fact that there is a near total media blackout on this matter, Mr. John Durham is the special counsel who is currently leading the investigation into the alleged spying that was done against Trump's campaign back in 2016. Essentially, he is the last person in the U.S. government who is still trying to get to the bottom of the whole Russia collusion narrative. And it looks like there has been a development in his case. That's because, according to this new court filing, it reveals the fact that the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Mr. Michael Horowitz, he concealed crucial information from Mr. John Durham. Now, before we get into what this court filing actually said, let me just give you a brief dossier on the three actors who are going to be discussing in this story so you can easily keep track of them. You have Mr. John Durham, who is, of course, the special counsel who is currently investigating the whole Trump-Russia collusion narrative. You have Mr. Michael Horowitz, who is the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. He's essentially the cop that watches all the cops in the Department of Justice. He's the watchman who's supposed to be watching the watchman. And then lastly, you have Mr. Michael Sussman. He is a former lawyer for the Hillary Clinton campaign back in 2016, and he currently has a criminal trial that's pending. And so what this court filing revealed was that Mr. Michael Horowitz, who is again the Inspector General, was concealing information from Mr. John Durham, who is the special counsel, and this information, it had to do with the ongoing prosecution of Mr. Michael Sussman, who was the former lawyer for Hillary Clinton's campaign. And besides concealing information, this court filing also reveals the fact that Michael Horowitz, he also failed to disclose that his office is currently in the possession of 2 cell phones, which were used by Mr. James Baker, who is the former FBI General Counsel. And so to give you a bit of background, last year, John Durham brought forth criminal charges against Michael Sussman, who is again the Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer, and those charges revolved around the fact that he lied to the FBI. Or to be more specific, for allegedly making a materially false statement to the FBI General Counsel, Mr. James Baker. Now, the details of that particular case are a little bit complicated, and we already did cover it in great detail in a previous episode. I'll throw a link to it right there at the top right corner if you want to check it out for yourself. But in short, this Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer, he allegedly lied to the FBI General Counsel, Mr. James Baker, about Trump's alleged ties with Russia. And his trial is coming up very soon. And so, naturally enough, ahead of the trial, Mr. John Durham is conducting discovery. He's trying to round up as much evidence as he possibly can ahead of the trial. Okay, so that is what's been happening in the background. Now, according to this court filing, here's how this discovery process actually played out. On October the 7th of last year, on October 7th, 2021, John Durham and his team had a meeting with Michael Horowitz and his team in order to collect any evidence for this upcoming trial. Then, in both the meeting as well as after the meeting, Mr. John Durham requested that all materials, including, quote, any documents, records, and information regarding Sussman that may have been in the possession of the Office of the Inspector General must be handed over. Then, on December the 17th of last year, which is 2 full months after the initial meeting, the Office of Michael Horowitz did provide some information regarding this lawyer to Mr. John Durham. Specifically, quote, Horowitz's office provided Durham with information that Sussman, who is again the Clinton lawyer, had given the Office of the Inspector General information in early 2017 that an OIG, which is the Office of the Inspector General employee's computer, was seen publicly in internet traffic and was connecting to a virtual private network in a foreign country. Now, before we even continue, this here raises a lot of very obvious questions. For instance, why would a lawyer for the Clinton campaign even know something like this? Secondly, why would he be interested in the activities of employees over in the Office of the Inspector General? And then thirdly, why would this lawyer, who is, again, just a private citizen, why would he seek out the Inspector General right after he himself was pushing anti-Trump information to both the FBI and the CIA? And so generally, this raises a lot of questions. But the story actually gets weirder from here. That's because after Michael Horowitz handed over this specific information to John Durham, the Office of the Inspector General, it added that, quote, the Office of the Inspector General represented to Durham's team that it had no other file or other documentation relating to the cyber matter. And so essentially what Michael Horowitz was saying was that they handed over all of the information that they had in their possession to Mr. John Durham. However, just last week, Mr. Michael Sussman's lawyer, they informed John Durham that there was additional information that was never handed over and was in fact being withheld from him. And this information included the fact that Michael Sussman had physically met with Michael Horowitz in March of 2017 to personally pass along the information about that employee's computer VPN usage. Meaning that Michael Horowitz never informed John Durham that he had physically, in person, met with the Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer. which then naturally raises a lot of questions. For instance, why would Michael Horowitz, who has such a high-ranking position, take a personal meeting from a Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer? That would seem rather random. In fact, according to Bill Shipley, who is a former federal prosecutor, quote, "You don't generally just call the inspector general and get a meeting with him personally." And besides the mystery of why this meeting took place at all, well, there's now the added question of why exactly did Michael Horowitz hide this meeting from John Durham, particularly given the fact that such a meeting obviously had a direct connection to the information that Michael Horowitz's office was specifically being asked for. But what was being concealed actually goes a lot further than that. That's because Mr. Sussman's lawyers, they further informed John Durham that, quote, "The VPN information had come from Rodney Joffe, a computer expert with close connections to the FBI. This was another material fact that had not been disclosed by Horowitz." And so you see, Michael Horowitz, he told John Durham that there was some employee who accessed a VPN network in some foreign country. He left out all the details, and the devil was in the details. That's because Rodney Joffe, he is a person of great importance to John Durham's case against Michael Sussman, as well as to the wider investigation into the origins of the whole Trump-Russia collusion thing. That's because Rodney Joffe was, quote, "alleged to have provided Sussman with falsified data about contacts between the Trump organization and Russia's Alpha Bank. Those alleged contacts were used by Hillary Clinton and her campaign to push the narrative that Trump was compromised by the Kremlin." And so very obviously, this was a material fact of great importance that was withheld from the Durham investigation. But even more unbelievably, it goes further than that. That's because besides all this intel that was withheld, well, since that meeting in October, John Durham's office has discovered that the Inspector General, quote, "currently possesses 2 FBI cell phones that belong to John Baker, the former FBI General Counsel." Here's in fact specifically what it says in the John Durham filing that he submitted to the court just a few days ago, quote, "In early January 2022, the Special Counsel's Office learned for the first time that the OIG, which is the Office of the Inspector General, currently possesses 2 FBI cell phones of the former FBI General Counsel." And so these cell phones, they are extremely important to the case. That's because, as we mentioned earlier, Mr. Michael Sussman, he was alleged to have lied to James Baker when he was trying to push this incriminating data about Trump and the Alpha Bank over to the FBI, and this data, by the way, later turned out to be false, which obviously then makes James Baker, as well as his cell phones, of central importance to this whole criminal case against Mr. Michael Sussman. And so, thus far, it's not exactly clear why Mr. Michael Horowitz decided to withhold all of this important data, as well as this important information from John Durham. And frankly, given the nature of this data, it would not make any sense that this was some kind of an accident. And so the question then naturally becomes, why would he withhold all of this information? And that question will have to be answered on another date because thus far we have not heard anything from Mr. Michael Horowitz's office regarding these allegations. Regardless, if you would like to read more about these new developments in the Durham probe, including this court filing is about 19 pages long. I would actually recommend you read it. It's pretty well laid out. It's all very rational. And I'll throw a PDF version of it into the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that you take a super quick moment to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And now, since this whole affair is so complex, I thought it would be a great opportunity to speak with the producer and the director of a phenomenal film called The Plot Against the President, which dissects this whole Russia-Gate narrative in a easy-to-follow manner. Now, the interview itself was awesome, and we can jump into it right after a super quick word from the sponsor of today's episode. That's right, Roman. The sponsor of today's episode is an awesome company called AMAC. That's AMAC, and it stands for the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now, what I learned earlier today, though, is that you don't actually need to be a mature American citizen yourself in order to join AMAC, because even though they're an organization that's geared towards people who are 50 years of age and above, you can actually join at any age as long as you're a American-loving patriot. And so what they say is that as our fundamental freedoms here in this country are being threatened by politicians who don't even necessarily know how to balance their own checking accounts, and as there is a concerted effort to censor conservatives by this woke ideology, one thing that you can do to fight back is to join the 2 million people who are already members of AMAC. And by joining, you'll have access to 3 main benefits. The first benefit is the money-saving benefit, because by joining, you'll have access to discounts on things like vitamins, restaurants, retail shops throughout the entire country. Second of all, you will gain access to the AMAC website, the AMAC app, as well as the AMAC magazine, which gives you something that the mainstream media doesn't, which is honest news that is grounded in facts. And third of all, and this is what a lot of people say is their favorite benefit, is that AMAC has your back over on Capitol Hill. Because with 2 million freedom-loving members, they are a voice for conservatives that cannot be ignored. And so if you are a person who considers themselves a constitutional conservative, then I would consider joining AMAC. You can do so over at amac.us. That's amac.us. So consider signing up, consider helping AMAC's effort, and getting access to these excellent membership benefits. So AMAC, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. And now, let's shift gears just a little bit. When I was down in Texas, I had the unique opportunity to sit down and speak with John and Amanda Milius, who are together the producer and the director of a phenomenal film called The Plot Against the President, and we discussed what it's like to bring the uncomfortable truth to light, as well as what it means for this country that you can use the facts to win in the court of public opinion, but you can't use them to win in the court of law. Check it out.
Basic level, I don't like the term deep state that much at this point. I prefer security state, and I think this movie actually it documents, one of the few times the security state was actually openly investigated. So, and we have the investigators on tape. So that's sort of what we documented.
Yeah. So let's dive into it a little bit, because it's been so many years now. It's almost, with so many things happening in the news cycle so fast, it's easy to forget that for the first 2.5 years, President Trump had that over his head, right? This whole Russia collusion thing, right? Oh, yeah. However, when you dug into it, I mean, what was it? What was the premise of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation?
Well, I mean, not only was he under that, the entire country was under this myth that the president and his team had anything to do with Russia. And the fact that all of the people that claimed that ran Crossfire Hurricane, were brought in and under oath admitted, all 65 people admitted that they had no evidence. And my argument is, this movie was important to be out there and to correct the record, because frankly, every single news station should have opened their show every night and said, there is no evidence of Russian collusion. All 65 people said no. The same amount of repetition that they hammered the fake news into our heads.
I would just say that, Lee Smith wrote the book, The Plot Against the President, and if there's a security apparatus that sort of was able to shoehorn an agenda into all of the agencies via the press on Russiagate. And Russiagate was just a massive disruption for almost the whole presidency. So if we didn't document it, it wouldn't get documented, because, we didn't know who was going to win the election. So, and now we saw how it turned out. So,
yeah. So in terms of accountability, I mean, it's been so many years now, and it seems, President Trump is even out of office now, that there's seemingly no accountability for what has happened, right? I mean, the only person seemingly investigating it is John Durham, but as President Trump has recently come out on multiple occasions, he said, "Where's John Durham? What is he doing?" Can you guys speak a little bit to that, about the lack of accountability and anything that you might know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why these things keep happening, because people do what they can get away with. So because there was no accountability at all, I mean, I think at most, what's his name? The lawyer was not put in jail for 2 months. He simply lost his law license for 2 months. It's of course they're going to continue doing it, and that's why we see them repeating this exact same blueprint all over the place. That's why they're doing what they're doing to Tucker Carlson. That's why they ran the op they ran on Matt Gaetz. That's why they are continuing to persecute the president, because nobody ever got in any kind of trouble. Again, and it's another reason why we appreciate outlets like yours telling the truth every day, and that we felt we had to make this movie and set the record straight. It's just the only accountability that it looks like we're going to get is in the court of public opinion.
The only security state type issue that has been flushed out of late is flying saucers. The New York Times would rather, talk to the deep state or the security state, whatever you want to call it, about flying saucers. And, Rubio came in with a report in the COVID bill, and now they have a proper report on flying saucers or UAPs. You're not going to see that happen with this very easily. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not getting my hopes up about anything that'll ever be done about what happened to our president.
I just remembered the one thing about Durham, though, so we've had a handful of screenings of The Plot Against the President recently, where we've had some of the people that are in it come and do Q&As, and Devin Nunes came and did one with us, and someone asked him this. They were like, what about Durham? What's going on? And the one thing that he said, and I listen, when he has an opinion, I put a lot of stock in that, and he said, well, the one thing I'll say that's been very promising about it is the fact that it's taken so long. He's like, if it was going to be a kind of a whitewash, it would have happened much more quickly. And the other thing is that there's been no leaks. There has not been a single leak out of the investigation. Now, that could be because it's not really doing very much and there's not much to leak and it's all nothing really is going to come of it, or maybe there's something is, and I don't work in the government anymore, but obviously if there was anybody that would have an opinion that I would be put a lot of weight in, it would be Devin Nunes's. So he has an interesting take on this. He doesn't have as dire of a lookout on it as I do.
Devin's he's a positive guy.
Well, what you said is actually, in my opinion, it's not that great, because if you can only win in the court of public opinion, but you have all these facts indicating that this was illegitimate and this was an operation that was not properly predicated in the least, right? Then you should actually be able to hold people accountable in the court of law. Because like you told me before this interview started, that this movie is a blueprint for what is being done to others, right? Because of course President Trump was a very extreme example of this, but the apparatus, the way that it all works, is continuing to operate unless something is done. But it's just such a shame that you can only win in the court of public opinion when it really is a legal matter.
Well, of course, but we don't have a legal system. I mean, this is one of the things that is the hardest. I was already pretty black-pilled when I made the movie, but then having to go through the 2020 election and watch, I actually was part of the Nevada team, and watching 20 binders worth of evidence not even be looked at by a court. At that point, when you tell Americans that most of us are very law and order. We're willing to put up with a lot of corruption and a lot of horrible things if we think that there will be a case heard, if we will think that there will be a fair hearing and that fairness will win out at some point. The fact that the courts have revealed themselves to be so completely corrupt, I think is a really dark turning point for our country. I think that the legal element of this is probably the worst part of it.
To be clear, I don't want to make this a conspiracy-oriented thing, but I think this goes back to the Warren Report and JFK. I mean, I think there's been a lot of things that we've seen happen historically that, post Second World War, that weren't, even when they did have a proper accounting, they weren't accounted for correctly. So my perspective is, and that's really what the film is about, we had to get it on record, and I keep reiterating how important that is, because if a report comes, does anybody really believe that they're actually going to properly suss out all the issues with the security state and what may have happened with Russiagate? I'm not confident.
Now, if you would like to check out their movie, The Plot Against the President, I will throw a link to it. It'll be right there in the description box below. And it's also worth noting that what you watched was not the full interview. If you would like to watch the interview in its entirety, as well as a plethora of other phenomenal content, you can do so over on Epoch TV, which is our awesome no censorship video platform. And right now, we're actually running an awesome promo where you can get full access to everything for just $1. I'll throw a link to it in the description box below. I hope you click on it. I hope you check it out. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already, in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. Also, consider hitting that notification bell so you can actually be notified of any new videos as we release them. And then lastly, if you happen to have a Telegram account, consider following us at FactsMatter_Roman. We'll publish the links to all of our episodes there, so in case anything ever does happen here on YouTube, you can always find us on Telegram. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.